Act 1. Cold Hook, 0 o'clock, 0:30. The thing I need you to understand, before I tell you any of it, is that on the footage, I am already standing at the door, 3 seconds before the timestamp reads 3:12 a.m. My eyes are open, my hand is on the handle, and I am still asleep in the bunk. Both of those things are true. I have seen the recordings. I know exactly what they show. I need you to hold on to that before we go any further, because everything that follows only makes sense if you already know where it ends up. Act 2. Grounding. 3 months before the study, I was 26 years old, $11,000 in debt from a master's program I'd quietly stopped attending, and eating rice and frozen vegetables 4 nights a week. I want you to really sit with that last part, not as a metaphor, not as scene-setting color, because that specific, grinding financial desperation is what made me ignore every instinct I had when I read the flyer. It was taped to a corkboard in the student union, pale yellow paper that had already begun to fade before anyone had read it. University sleep study. Participants wanted 2 weeks. Monitored overnight stays at the campus sleep lab, Tuesday through Saturday. $600 per week, paid in cash at the end of each session block. No drugs administered, no invasive procedures, just electrodes, observation, and a firm mattress in a quiet room. I tore the contact number off the bottom. The lab was in the sub-level of the behavioral sciences building, one of those institutional corridors that doesn't quite feel like it belongs to the floors above it, the kind of hallway where the ceiling tiles are a slightly different shade of white from the walls and the fluorescent lights hum at a frequency you don't consciously register until you've been sitting under them for an hour and realize your jaw is clenched. The smell hit me on the first night. Antiseptic electrode paste, sharp and medicinal, with something almost sweet underneath. The ghost of whatever cleaning product they mopped the floors with. And behind that, faintly, the stale coffee from the night technician's insulated mug sitting on the corner of the monitoring desk. Dr. Harlow ran the study. She was in her 50s, small, with reading glasses perpetually pushed up on her forehead. And she had the specific, unhurried manner of someone who had explained the same consent form to 100 nervous strangers. She walked me through the monitoring room, a row of 3 separate sleeping chambers, each about the size of a generous walk-in closet, each with a bunk, a call button, and a camera mounted high in the corner. The chambers shared a wall with the observation room, where a technician would watch the feeds through the night. She showed me to the middle chamber. I lay down. She pressed the electrodes to my scalp with the antiseptic paste, cold at first, then oddly warm, and handed me a small keychain panic button. The ceiling directly above the bunk had one crack in it, a thin, branching fracture running from the corner of a tile outward, splitting into smaller forks the way a river delta looks from altitude. I stared at it for 20 minutes before I fell asleep the first night. By the end of the first week, it had become ritual, those same branching lines, the last image before dark, the thing I looked at to remind myself where I was. I thought the study was harmless. I want you to remember that. I genuinely believed it. Act 3. Escalating dread. The first 2 nights were exactly what Dr. Harlow had described. I went to sleep, I woke up, I filled out a brief questionnaire about dream recall and sleep quality, and I collected my daily log credit. The other 2 participants, I never met them directly, just glimpsed them in the corridor, seemed equally unremarkable. Quiet people with the hollow-eyed look that graduate school exhaustion produces. Night 3, I woke up and my socks were on the floor. I had gone to sleep wearing them. I never sleep without socks. Bad circulation, perpetually cold feet. But they were on the floor beside the bunk, neatly placed, and I had no memory of removing them. When I mentioned it to the morning technician, a younger man, maybe 23, who always wore headphones around his neck and had the distracted energy of someone pulling a double shift. He wrote something in his notes and said mild somnambulism wasn't unusual in a monitored environment. Some people found sleep labs slightly activating, especially early in a study. Their nervous systems stayed alert because they knew they were being watched. I nodded. I let it go. 4-minute tension spike. Night 5. I asked to see the footage. Not of myself specifically. I framed it as curiosity about the monitoring process, how the playback system worked. The morning technician pulled up the observation interface, walked me through the timestamping structure, showed me the live feeds from the empty chambers. Casual, no hesitation. Then I asked if I could see recorded playback from the previous night. He paused. Not long, half a second maybe, but half a second too long. He said the raw footage was processed before review, and that edited clips were available through Dr. Harlow if I submitted a written request, per study protocol. I submitted the written request. 2 days later, Dr. Harlow sat with me in a small conference room and played 45 minutes of highlight clips from my sleep recordings. Normal REM movement, mild shifting, one moment where I sat partially upright before lying back down. Everything labeled, time-stamped, organized in a way that felt thorough and deliberate. But sitting in that conference room, I noticed the timestamps had a gap. Every clip jumped from somewhere around 3 a.m. to a clip that began at 3:23, 23 minutes. Not labeled as no activity, not noted, simply absent. When I asked, Dr. Harlow said the system performed an automated calibration cycle between 3 and 4 a.m. that occasionally interrupted the recording buffer and that the window contained no notable activity. I said I understood. That night I didn't fall asleep for a long time. I stared at the crack in the ceiling tile, the branching lines, and I thought about 23 minutes. Night 7. I found a scratch on my left forearm. 3 parallel lines, shallow but precise, running from just below the elbow toward my wrist. I had no memory of them. They weren't there when I went to sleep. When I showed them to the morning technician, he called Dr. Harlow in, and she examined them and said they were consistent with the edge of the bunk frame. Some subjects shifted in ways that caused minor contact abrasions. Would I like a bandage? I took the bandage. 8-minute tension spike. On night 9, Dr. Harlow wasn't there. A different technician ran the observation room, older, deliberate, who introduced himself only as Voss. He had the stillness of someone accustomed to long, quiet hours, which I initially took for professionalism. But over the course of the check-in process, I noticed that he never quite met my eyes. Not nervously, in the specific way of someone who has been instructed not to. That was the night I got into the server. The morning technician had logged into the observation system while I was still in the room, earlier that week, and I had watched his fingers without watching his fingers, the way you absorb information you already know you're going to need. The password was 6 characters, numbers only. I had a reasonable guess. At 5 a.m., I was alone in the observation room for 4 minutes, while Voss went to retrieve the morning log printout from the printer at the end of the hall. 4 minutes was enough. The unedited footage was archived by date. I found my chamber file. I found the night of the scratches. The calibration gap was there, but it wasn't a gap. The recording was continuous. The footage wasn't missing. It had been removed from the version they showed me. From 3:11 to 3:23 a.m. on night 7, my body was not in the bunk. I watched it in fast forward with the sound off, both hands pressed flat against the desk to keep them still. At 3:11 and 42 seconds, I sat up in the bunk, stood, and then walked. And I need you to let yourself picture this. Walked toward the far end of the chamber, toward the door I had been told was a maintenance access. A door that, When I had once asked about it during check-in, Voss said was not in use and never opened from this side. In the footage, I opened it from this side. I walked through. The door swung closed behind me. The timestamp continued. 3:13, 3:15, 3:19. The chamber was empty. The bunk was empty. At 3:22 a.m., the door swung open and I walked back, lay down, pulled the blanket to my chin, and then, and I have watched this on the copy I made to my phone before Voss returned, I have watched it perhaps 40 times. Silence 3. So before I lay fully flat, the figure in the bunk turned its head and looked directly at the camera. Not at the door, not at the ceiling, at the camera. The expression on my face was not one I have ever made. Act 4. Peak crisis. 12-minute tension spike. I went back that night. I know how that sounds. But I needed to know what was on the other side of that door, and I needed to be conscious when I found out. Some part of me, the part that is slightly more reckless than it should be, believed that if I could stay awake past 3:12, I could interrupt the cycle, prove to myself that I had not lost control of something fundamental. I set a silent vibration alarm on my watch for 3:10 a.m. At 3:10, I was awake, lying still, watching the ceiling, the crack, the branching lines. At 3:11, I felt a pressure begin behind my eyes. Not pain, more like the sensation of water slowly filling a space behind my face. A warm, heavy weight spreading from the base of my skull forward. I pressed my hands flat against the mattress. I focused on the simple instruction. Stay. Don't move. At 3:11 and 30 seconds, my right hand lifted off the mattress. I did not lift it. I pressed it back down. There was resistance, not a physical pulling, but a cognitive resistance. The specific horror of wanting your body to do one thing and watching it prepare to do another. The way it feels in a dream when you try to run and your legs won't answer. But in reverse, my body had an intention, and that intention was not mine. Something in it had learned the route over 9 nights of practice and was navigating towards the door without consulting me at all. I sat up. I know I sat up because I watched the ceiling fall away and saw the wall in front of me. I did not make the decision to sit up. I focused everything I had on my legs. Stay, floor, bunk, stay. And for one specific moment at 3:12 and 11 seconds, I felt the pressure plateau, felt it hesitate. My legs did not swing off the bunk. Silence 3. And then the camera in the corner of my chamber flickered off. In the dark, I heard the maintenance door open. I cannot tell you with certainty what came into the room. What I can tell you is the sound of a second person breathing in a small enclosed space, not behind me, not in front of me, adjacent to me, in a way I have no accurate language for, as though something occupied the same physical space I did but was offset from it by some interval that has no name. And I can tell you what I felt, which was its attention, not curiosity, not hunger. The quality of being examined by something that has been studying you for a long time and has just decided the time is right for you to know it's there. The camera came back on at 3:22. I was standing at the door. My hand was on the handle. I have no memory of crossing the room. When I looked down at the keyhole, I could see the thinnest sliver of pale, sourceless light passing through from the other side. And the light was interrupted periodically, in a way that told me something was standing at the other side of the door, waiting for me to open it. I stepped back. I went to the bunk. I lay down. I did not sleep again. In the morning, I told Dr. Harlow I was withdrawing from the study for personal reasons. I collected my partial payment. I never went back to that hallway. Act 5. Unresolved Aftermath. I've been home for 3 weeks. My own apartment, my own ceiling, no cracks, no branching lines, nothing to stare at but white paint and a smoke detector. I told myself the lab was a contained event. Stress-induced parasomnia, the specific paranoia that comes from sleeping in a monitored space for 9 consecutive nights. I told myself the footage had an explanation I hadn't been cleared to receive. I told myself that for about 8 days. On the 9th night home, I woke at 3:12 a.m. standing in front of my bedroom door. Not the front door, not the bathroom, my bedroom door, standing in the exact center of the room, facing it in complete dark, with no memory of standing up and no awareness of having crossed the floor. I went back to bed. I wrote it down in the log I'd started keeping and told myself it was residual disruption from the study schedule. The following night, same time, same door, same position. I've been logging it. 16 nights since leaving the lab. 12 of those nights I have woken up on my feet. The last 4 times, my hand has been on the handle. I have not opened the door. I want to be clear about that. Whatever learned the route in that sleep lab, whatever practiced for 9 nights using my body as transport, it hasn't gotten through yet. I tell myself this is meaningful. I tell myself the distinction between almost and through is the whole thing. But 3 nights ago, I crouched down and looked at the gap under the door at 3:12 a.m. There was a shadow on the other side, the specific shape of feet standing close to the door, pointed toward me. And in the gap, faint, sourceless, the same light I had seen through the keyhole in the lab. I recognized it. I haven't opened the door, but I've started to understand that I am not the one who will decide when it opens. Whatever is on the other side has been patient for 9 weeks. It knows my schedule. It knows the route. The scratches on my arm started again this morning. 3 lines. Parallel, running from elbow to wrist. I haven't been anywhere near a bunk frame.